It was a rainy Tuesday night, and my 2011 F-150 was officially dead. The transmission didn't just slip, it gave up the ghost right in the middle of an intersection while I was driving back from an 11-hour shift fixing industrial HVAC units. I had to pay $200 for a tow to a local dealership, sitting in the cab of the tow truck smelling like old grease and Freon, just wanting to go home. The dealership showroom was bright, clean, and smelled of cheap air freshener and new leather. I was exhausted, grease smudges on my work pants, clutching a thermos of cold coffee. The salesman, a guy named Dave with a slick haircut, smiled when I told him I just needed a reliable pre-owned truck, nothing fancy, just something to carry my tools. "We've got a great 2020 Ranger," Dave said, tapping his keyboard. "Payment should be right around $350 a month with your trade-in value. Let me just run the credit check to finalize the financing." I nodded, leaning back in the plastic chair. I wasn't worried. I've worked since I was 16. I don't buy things I can't afford. I pay my bills on time, every time. My score should have been sitting comfortably around 760. Dave's smile faded as he stared at the monitor. He clicked his mouse twice, frowned, and then looked up at me. The friendly, eager-to-sell attitude evaporated instantly. "Is there a problem?" I asked. "Mr. Reynolds," Dave said, his voice dropping to that quiet, uncomfortable tone people use when they're giving you medical bad news. "I can't approve this. In fact, our sister won't even let me submit the application." "Why? My credit is clean." "Your current credit score is 482, Dave said, turning the monitor toward me. "And according to the report, you're currently 4 months delinquent on a commercial business loan for $600,000. There's also an active repossession order out for a luxury SUV leased under your name." I stared at the screen. The numbers swam in front of my eyes. $600,000. I make $62,000 a year busting my knuckles. I don't own a business. I don't drive a luxury SUV. Then my eyes caught the name of the primary debtor registered to the commercial loan on the second page of the printout. Elena Fine Arts, LLC. Elena, my oldest sister. The blood went completely cold in my veins. My hands started to shake, not from fear, but from a sudden heavy weight dropping into my stomach. I looked at Dave, who was watching me like I was some kind of con artist trying to pull a fast one. "Can I keep this printout?" I asked, my voice completely flat. "Sure," Dave said, sliding the papers across the desk. I took the papers, walked out into the rain, and stood under the awning of the dealership. I didn't call my sister. I didn't call my parents. I just watched the water stream down the glass of the showroom, realizing my life had been stolen by the people who gave it to me. To understand how a mechanic ends up with a $500,000 art gallery debt, you have to understand the family hierarchy. There are 2 kids, Elena and me. Elena's 34, 4 years older, and she's always been the family's resident intellectual. She went to an expensive liberal arts college, talks about curation and aesthetic value, and drinks imported tea from tiny porcelain cups. She's elegant, articulate, and completely useless when it comes to surviving in the real world. My parents, Richard and Susan, have spent their entire lives bankrolling her failures, calling them creative adjustments. Then there is me. I went to trade school. I fix air conditioners and heating systems. In their eyes, I'm just a blunt instrument, a low-level mechanic who smells like sweat and engine oil. Because I never asked for money, they assumed I didn't need respect either. I was the invisible son who just handled his own life and stayed out of the way. But 5 years ago, I wasn't invisible enough. I fell through a rusted roof during a commercial maintenance job, broke 3 ribs, and shattered my collarbone. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital on heavy painkillers. My parents came over acting like saints. They said they'd handle the paperwork, my insurance claims, my tax returns, my banking, so I could just rest. I gave them my wallet, my ID, my social security card. I trusted them. They didn't just file the insurance, they photocopied everything. While I was doing physical therapy, learning how to lift my arm again so I could go back to work, they were using my identity to back Elena's ultimate dream. Elena Fine Arts, a high-end gallery and tea lounge in the historic district. I looked at the credit report under the street lamp outside the dealership. Elena had the luxury SUV and the minimalist gallery space. My parents had the pride of a successful daughter, and I had the bill. I didn't go home. I drove my broken-down loaner car straight to the 24-hour diner down the street from my apartment, ordered a black coffee, and spread the credit report across the sticky laminate table. I didn't storm into my sister's gallery. I didn't scream at my parents over the phone. If you work on commercial HVAC systems, you learn quickly that throwing a wrench at a leaking compressor just cracks the casing. You have to find the source of the pressure. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 3 years. I put on my only decent pair of slacks and an iron button-down shirt, grabbed my folder, and walked into the downtown branch of the commercial bank listed on the loan. The commercial lending section was quiet, carpeted, and thick with the smell of old money. I sat across from a loan officer named Henderson, a man with thin hair and a sharp suit. I didn't play the victim. I laid the credit report on his desk and kept my voice level. I'm Marcus Reynolds. I'm listed as the primary guarantor for a $600,000 business loan for Elena Fine Arts, LLC. The loan is 4 months delinquent. I need to see the original application file. Henderson frowned, checking his computer. Mr. Reynolds, usually these files are confidential unless I'm the guy you're about to sue for the balance, I interrupted, leaning forward. My credit is ruined, and I have never signed a commercial loan agreement in my life. We can look at the file together now, or we can look at it later with a federal investigator. That changed his tone. 10 minutes later, he came back with a thick manila folder. As I flipped through the pages, the sheer scale of the betrayal settled heavily in my chest. There it was, my signature, written in a loopy, elegant cursive that wasn't mine. It was my dad's handwriting trying to mimic my straight, jagged script. But it got worse. The employment verification page listed me as the regional technical director for a multi-state mechanical corporation I'd only ever done freelance subcontracting for. My annual salary was listed as $155,000. They had forged a corporate letterhead, fabricated W-2 tax forms, and even used an old notary stamp belonging to a family friend who had passed away 2 years ago. Is something wrong, Mr. Reynolds? Henderson asked, watching my face. Everything, I said quietly. I looked at the transaction history at the back of the file. For the first 1.5 years, the monthly payments had been drawn directly from my parents' retirement account. They'd been funding her illusion with their own life savings until the well hit dry. Once their account hit zero 4 months ago, they just stopped paying, letting the debt fall onto the shadow profile they had built under my name. They expected me to be the safety net for Elena's failure without ever giving me the choice to say no. I need certified copies of every document in this folder, I told Henderson, pulling out my phone to record his confirmation. And I need the contact information for your legal department, because this isn't a bad debt. This is a felony. The anniversary party for Elena Fine Arts was held on a Thursday evening. I knew about it because my mom had left a flyer on my kitchen counter 2 weeks prior, subtly hinting that I should dress nicely if I decided to stop by. The gallery was located in the historic district, tucked between a high-end boutique and a French bistro. Through the massive glass windows, I could see the crowd, men in tailored blazers, women draped in cashmere, holding thin-stemmed glasses of champagne. The lighting was soft, minimalist, designed to make the overpriced oil paintings on the white walls look like masterpieces. I didn't change out of my work clothes. I wore my heavy leather boots, my canvas work jacket with the grease stains on the cuffs, and my tool belt slung over my shoulder. I walked through the double-glass doors, the bell chiming softly above me. The chatter in the room didn't stop, but the people nearest the entrance immediately stepped back, casting uncomfortable glances at the blue-collar intruder. I spotted Elena near the back, standing by a marble pedestal. She was wearing a silk dress, laughing gracefully at something a man in a silver suit was saying. My mom saw me first. Her smile froze. She quickly set her glass down and scurried over, grabbing my arm with a grip that was surprisingly tight. "Marcus, what are you doing?" she whispered, her eyes darting around the room. "Why are you dressed like that? Go out to the alley. Your father is out back by the catering van. Go talk to him." "I'm not here to see Dad," I said, my voice carrying just enough to make a nearby couple turn their heads. I walked past her, straight toward Elena. My heavy boots thudded against the polished hardwood floor. Elena saw me approaching, her eyes widening slightly before she smoothed her features into that calm, superior expression she always used on me. "Marcus," she said smoothly, turning to her guest, "this is my younger brother. He's in the mechanical trade." "We need to talk," I said, pulling the certified folder from under my arm and dropping it on the marble pedestal next to a bronze sculpture. The heavy thud cut through the classical music playing in the background. Elena looked down at the folder, then back at me, her voice dropping its artificial warmth. "Marcus, don't do this here. This is a significant night for the business." "It's a significant night for my credit score, too," I said. My dad appeared from the crowd, his face flushed red. He took me by the shoulder, trying to steer me toward the office door at the back. "Marcus, inside, now!" I let him guide me into the small office, Elena and my mom slipping in behind us and locking the door. The silence in the office was suffocating, a stark contrast to the low hum of the party outside. "What is wrong with you?" my dad hissed, his voice shaking with anger. "Embarrassing your sister in front of her clients? Have you lost your mind? You forged my signature for a $600,000 commercial loan," I said, looking him dead in the eye. The anger vanished from his face, replaced by a sudden hollow paleness. He looked at my mom, who instantly covered her mouth. Elena stood by the desk, crossing her arms, looking more annoyed than guilty. "Marcus, let's be rational," Elena said, her tone condescending. "It was a temporary arrangement. The gallery needed a guarantor with clean credit to secure the commercial lease and the loan. You weren't using your credit for anything. You live in a rented apartment." "You ruined my life so you could play business owner," I said. "You bought a $70,000 SUV with my name." "We were paying it," my mom cried out, stepping forward. "We used our retirement money until we couldn't anymore. We did it for the family, Marcus. Elena's success is the family's success. Why can't you just be happy that your sister is making something of herself?" "By destroying me?" I asked. "My score is a 482. I can't buy a truck to do my job. I'm one step away from being sued by a commercial bank." My dad tried to straighten his shoulders, falling back on his old authority. "Look, we will figure it out. We will find a way to make the payments. But you are going to drop this tone. Family doesn't turn on family." I looked at them three. The illusion of their superiority was completely gone. They didn't see a son or a brother. They saw an asset they had used until it broke. "You're right," I said, picking up my folder. "Family doesn't do this." I opened the office door and walked out, leaving them in the room. I didn't look at the art, and I didn't look at the guests. I just walked out into the cool night air, the weight in my stomach turning into something hard and permanent.
The next morning, I didn't call in sick. I took an indefinite leave of absence. I spent Friday in a cramped office on the 4th block of an old brick building downtown. Sitting across from me was a lawyer named Vance. He didn't wear a designer suit, and his desk was buried under mountains of legal briefs. But he had a reputation for being an absolute pit bull when it came to corporate fraud. I laid out the certified bank documents, the fabricated W-2 forms, and the credit report on the table. Vance didn't say a word for 10 minutes. He just flipped through the pages, his thumb tracing the loopy, cursive signature my dad had forged. "This is remarkably sloppy," Vance said, leaning back in his leather chair. "They used a deceased notary stamp. They printed a fake corporate letterhead. This isn't just identity theft, Marcus. This is bank fraud, forgery, and grand larceny. It's a federal matter because the loan involved small business relief funds." "What are my options?" I asked, my voice flat. "We don't play defense," Vance said, a cold smile appearing on his face. "If we just dispute the debt, the bank will drag their feet for years while your life remains on hold. We go on the offensive. We file a formal criminal complaint for identity theft with the federal police. At the same time, we launch a civil lawsuit against your sister's LLC and your parents personally for damages, credit destruction, and forgery." "Do it," I said. Vance tapped his pen on the folder. "Marcus, I need you to understand something. Once I press send on these filings, there is no coming back. Your sister is looking at real prison time. Your parents will likely lose everything they have left trying to pay the legal fees and restitution. Are you ready for that? I thought about my mom telling me my credit didn't matter because I was just a mechanic. I thought about Elena drinking champagne in her silk dress paid for by the ribs I broke 5 years ago. They made their choice 5 years ago when they copied my ID. Press the button. Vance's instructions for the next 2 weeks were simple. Absolute silence. No texts, no phone calls, no arguments. If they called, I was to let it go to voicemail and forward the audio directly to his email. And they did call. Once the bank received the formal fraud affidavit from Vance's office, the gears of the corporate machine began to grind. The bank frozen Elena's LLC's operating accounts to prevent any further dissipation of funds. Elena's credit card for the business was declined at a high-end framing supplier. My phone lit up with 16 missed calls from my dad in a single afternoon. Then came the text messages from my mom. "Marcus, what did you do? The bank blocked the account. We can't pay the gallery's electric bill. Call your father right now." I didn't reply. I screenshotted every single message and sent it to Vance. Elena tried a different tactic. She sent a long, carefully worded email about family solidarity and how she was willing to put my name on the gallery's board of directors as a partner to make things right. She even offered to let me display some of my old metalwork welding projects in the back corner of the room. She still thought she was better than me. She still thought she could buy my silence with crumbs from her table. I didn't answer that either. I just sat in my quiet apartment, eating my cheap dinners, watching the trap spring shut. They had spent years building an illusion of success on a foundation of lies, and I was about to pull the rug out from under their feet.
The collapse happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I didn't witness it firsthand, but Vance called me around 3 p.m. to give me the play-by-play. The federal investigators and local police had coordinated with the bank's security division. They didn't quietly slide a letter under the door. They showed up at the gallery in 2 unmarked sedans right during a private viewing session for a group of corporate collectors. Elena was in the middle of pitching a series of abstract landscape paintings when 2 plainclothes detectives walked in, flashed their badges, and presented a warrant for financial fraud and grand larceny. According to Vance, Elena tried to argue, her voice rising into an elegant shriek, claiming it was a private family misunderstanding. The detectives didn't care about her artistic temperament. They handcuffed her behind her back and led her out the front doors, right past her wealthy clients who were busy whispering and taking out their phones. While Elena was being processed at the precinct, a flatbed tow truck hired by the commercial lender arrived at her luxury apartment complex. They hooked up the luxury SUV, the one leased under my name that she had skipped 4 payments on, and dragged it down the street, its tires screeching against the asphalt. The illusion was dead. The real panic set in an hour later. My phone started vibrating so hard it nearly slid off my kitchen table. It was my dad. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, my mom called. I let it go. Then my dad called again. On the 4th attempt, I picked up the phone and set it on speaker. I didn't say a word. "Marcus!" My dad's voice exploded through the tiny speaker. He sounded completely unhinged, stripped of all his usual patriarchal dignity. "You're satisfied? Your sister is sitting in a holding cell. They took the car. They've locked the gallery doors." "I didn't put her there," I said, my voice dropping into a low, steady rumble. "The law did." "You filed the police report," my mom wailed in the background. I could hear her pacing frantically across their living room floor. "How could you do this to your own blood? She's your sister, Marcus. She has a reputation. Her life is ruined." "My life was ruined the second you guys copied my driver's license while I was on painkillers." "We were going to fix it," my dad shouted, slamming his hand against something hard on his end of the line. "We just needed more time. We're your parents. We raised you. We gave you everything. You owe us." "I don't owe you anything, and you ran out of time 5 years ago." I hung up. 2 hours later, they drove down to my apartment complex in my dad's aging sedan. I watched them from my second-story window.
They stood by the rusted iron gate, my mom clutching her purse to her chest, crying, while my dad hammered his fist against the intercom buzzer. They looked small. The arrogance was entirely gone, replaced by the desperate, ugly terror of people who had finally realized that their actions had consequences. They buzzed my unit for 20 straight minutes. I didn't press the button to let them in. Instead, I called the non-emergency police line, reported 2 individuals trespassing and harassing a resident on the property, and gave the dispatcher their license plate number. 10 minutes later, a cruiser pulled up, and a young officer politely but firmly told my parents they needed to leave the premises immediately or face arrest for trespassing. I watched my dad argue for a few seconds, his face turning purple, before my mom pulled him back into the car. They drove away into the evening traffic, their brake lights fading into the smog. For the first time in 5 years, the heavy, suffocating knot in my chest loosened. They had spent a lifetime treating me like a disposable tool, a grease monkey who existed only to serve their golden child's vanity. But tools can cut back if you handle them wrong. I turned off my phone, sat down in my quiet living room, and finally slept through the night.
The civil trial and the criminal hearings took nearly 7 months to fully resolve. The final courtroom looked nothing like the elegant gallery Elena had built on my ruin. It was a cold, windowless room with scuffed linoleum floors and a slow-ticking clock on the wall. Elena sat at the defense table next to a public defender. The silk dresses were gone. She wore a plain gray blazer, her hair pulled back into a tight bun, looking exhausted and stripped of her aristocratic armor. My parents sat in the second row of the gallery, holding hands. They looked like they had aged a decade. My dad's eyes were fixed on the floor, unable to look at me, while my mom wept quietly into a crumpled tissue. Vance stood next to me, cool and methodical. When it was our turn, he didn't give a dramatic speech. He simply presented the facts: the forged W-2 forms, the deceased notary stamp, the bank records showing how my parents had drained their own retirement to fund Elena's lifestyle before dumping the catastrophic debt onto my shadow profile. The turning point came when the judge turned his attention to Elena. "Miss Reynolds," the judge said, his voice echoing off the wood-paneled walls, "did you at any point obtain written or verbal consent from your brother to secure this $600,000 commercial loan?" Elena opened her mouth, closed it, and looked at her lawyer. The lawyer gave a microscopic shake of his head. "No, Your Honor," she whispered. "And did you knowingly operate a business using credit obtained through identity theft?" A long, suffocating silence filled the room. "Yes," she said, her voice cracking. The judge didn't show any sympathy. The evidence of deliberate financial forgery was overwhelming. Under the criminal plea agreement, Elena pleaded guilty to felony bank fraud and identity theft. Given the massive dollar amount, she was sentenced to 2 years in a minimum security federal facility, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. My parents, due to their age and lack of prior records, received 2 years of intensive probation as co-conspirators. But the real punishment was financial. The civil judgment Vance secured ordered the complete liquidation of Elena Fine Arts, LLC. The gallery's inventory, the minimalist furniture, and my parents' remaining assets were seized and auctioned off by the court to pay restitution and legal fees. They were left entirely bankrupt. Outside the courthouse, my dad tried to stop me near the elevators. He looked frail, his voice trembling. "Marcus, please, she's your sister. We're your family. We lost everything. Are you happy now?" I stopped and looked at him. I didn't feel anger anymore. Just a profound, empty indifference. "You didn't lose everything because of me," I told him quietly. "You lost everything because you gambled my life away and lost the bet." I walked away, and I didn't look back. 6 months later, my life is completely rewritten. The federal fraud conviction meant the commercial bank was forced to completely expunge the $600,000 debt from my record. My credit score bounced back up to a healthy 740. Last month, I finally bought that 2020 Ford Ranger. I also moved out of my cramped apartment and leased a small, clean workshop on the edge of the city. There's a small neon sign in the window that reads, "Reynolds Climate Systems."
It's a modest business, built on hard work and late nights, but it belongs entirely to me. My parents tried to send a letter through Vance's office a few weeks ago, talking about healing and forgiveness. I told Vance to shred it. Some betrayals don't deserve an apology, and some debts can never be repaid. But as I sit in my workshop after a long shift, drinking a cold beer and looking at my tools, I realize I don't care anymore. I'm not bitter. I'm just free.